John.
We are creating it collectively. I think collective consciousness creates reality, even though we have a certain amount of control over our own reality tunnels. So there's a tunnel that we ourselves can control to a certain point, to a certain extent. And so within that tunnel, we have the hermetic principle of cause and effect, which, goes and is actually going to be talked about in some of my parts of the book. And so we're talking about decisions that you make, and every decision you make will have a consequence. Whether it's a good consequence or a bad consequence, that decision will have a consequence. And so when you're in this reality tunnel that you have access to, you're basically able to create ripples in space-time that will alter your own future reality in the third dimension based off conscious intent, conscious thought, and energy that you put behind those thoughts and intents. And so that ripple goes out and takes things that are in what we call in physics superposition, multiple realities that can occur, and it kind of slams and isolates one particular reality and brings that into the tunnel where you are, and you are on a trajectory or a collision course directly with that, based off of decisions you could have made 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 minutes ago, 100 years ago, 1 second ago. It varies as we are living in this moment by moment, third dimensional reality. And so collectively, though, as a global planet, we are all helping to create and manifest reality on this planet based off of what's going on in us, our internal thought, our consciousness, our ideologies, our belief systems, and all of that. And also the amount of fear that we're operating under, the PTSD that we're operating under, the depression that we're operating, all that comes into play with a global connective consciousness, just like the internet. And so you'll see the turmoil manifesting on particular parts of the planet based off of what's happening in the manifestation of the complete consciousness of the planet. It can isolate in different areas, but it doesn't mean particularly those people in those areas caused that trauma. It can be coming from all the collective consciousness. As if you're living in a house and your house, for example, your office desk is all messy and it's trash, and your house is trash and everything else is filthy, that's showing that inside of you, you filled up with so much trauma and chaos that there's nothing left on the inside, and it spills over to your outside world. And so when you see these things going on like in Afghanistan and what's going on in South Africa and all these other places, we're looking at the spilling up fullness of human consciousness globally, and the spilling over is what's happening on the outside. What starts on the inside then eventually makes it to the outside. It's not the opposite way around. And so it shows us that we still have a lot more work to do. We still have to really tap into the global consciousness. We have to continue to wake people up, raise them up, and we have to continue to teach them about the ancient past, because all these things that are going on now are not new. This is ancient stuff that's been going on for millennia in cycles. And so we have to get people to see into the distant past so we know, because the past is prologue. And if the past is prologue, if we can go back and access these horrors and these detriments and these tortures and everything else that's gone on, and these bad political systems and everything else, we can isolate them and figure out, where did we go wrong? How can we now see this, understand it, and then correct ourselves so that we can have a better future? I think that's really what we're trying to do, myself and Matt. We're trying to create a better future by tapping into this ancient past and giving people a real idea of what really happened. How can we clean up our consciousness? How can we reprogram ourselves? How can we open up ourselves to understand that change is needed and how to create that change based off of what happened in the ancient past? So that's my take on it. I don't know, Matt may have a slightly different one, but that's what I see.
Yes. Will, can I add a little bit of a layer to that?
For sure.
So that was very well said, Billy. And I want to add even another layer that I really see as part of this research. And sometimes it can be an uncomfortable truth to understand. But what Billy said was spot on. We're what's called conscious co-creators of reality. The world is mostly made up of people that don't realize the power that they have. So essentially what happens is they allow the creating of that reality through consciousness through others. So others direct them. This is how I should feel. This is how I should think. Therefore, that's what I project. So the reality that's around us is almost somewhat of an illusion, because it's based largely on, the old paradigm of control through fear and manipulation, but it is eroding. It's eroding all around us. And I'm looking very positively towards the future, but there are things right now that need to be known. What's going on in the Middle East right now with Afghanistan is the same story in a similar sense in terms of what ISIS was used for, not the goddess of Egypt, the terrorist group that was funded. There's a lot of evil still that rules our world. That doesn't mean that we just accept it and then allow it to continue. We accept it, but then we decide to make changes. We take back our creative responsibility on this planet and not let them do it. And what I mean by that is when you trace all the dark money and origins, things that happen under the table at the CIA, Federal Reserve, the central bank, what you find is, unfortunately, a system of funding secretly either conflict through wars or in some ways creating and fueling a terrorist organization. It really all goes back, and I'm not going to go down this hole too far, but it really goes back to everything from 9/11 to everything that happened with ISIS to everything that the Taliban are doing now. If you have an economy that's 70% based on the military funding, you have to have justification for that spending. Imagine if, let's say, we went through 10 years of no war, and then we had Senate hearings where they're looking at the budget and they're like, why are we still paying 70% of the GDP of the entire United States towards the military when we don't need to anymore? Mm-hmm. Well, to prevent that, and on many, many other levels, you essentially create conflict. But more importantly, you create a conflict in a very specific way that can be used as propaganda for fear. Yes, there's terrible things happening in Afghanistan. Yes, there are people suffering, and it's absolutely horrible. But the other thing we got to understand is it's part of us being controlled through fear and then allowing and almost pushing for military action. Okay, that's what this is, to restart the wheels of the military industrial complex. And we have to look at this and say, Afghanistan needs help with the people through all these organizations that can help them, but we don't need to go into war. There's other ways to resolve this, okay? The Taliban are being used as a tool. They're being used as a tool for fear in the population, and they're being used as a tool for military intervention. And I just want to say that, like what Billy said, we're conscious co-creators here. We can choose to reject that message of fear and war and instead project a completely different message. And I think that era of them having this control is getting smaller and smaller. And there's tactics. This is all they have left. Taliban is all they have left. This has been in their back pocket for a while, right? They sort of let them, do their thing, and then here we are. This is their last card. So let's reject what's going on in terms of having a fear-based economy that's pushing towards war. And remember what Billy said, we're the co-creators here. We need to take back our power to co-create a world that's not based on war, corruption, and materialism.